Hello, I'm Mark Snowden. I'm getting to be your teacher for the People Teams training. This is our seventh in a series, and this one is going to be talking about mobilization, and we'll get into what that means as we try to help others come along. Let me shrink my camera bubble and just give you the outline again about mobilization, how you'll be able to involve others in work and be able to even help them complete the cycle and form a new team. This is a great session, and I know you will enjoy it. So let's get right in. Today's biblical foundation, we're going to take a look at a story that I call the resting tribes and the rest of the tribes. If you look at the map, there's one thing I want you to see: the Jordan River that runs north to south in the promised land that Moses and Joshua had allocated to the people all throughout the promised land, if you remember that phrase. And if you haven't noticed it, take a look east of the Jordan River. There's three tribes over there. And that's basically where today's Bible story happens. The children of Israel getting ready to cross the Jordan River and go after Jericho and be able to take the promised land. But before that, Joshua is now the commander and Moses is gone. He's dead. And so Joshua is in charge of the troops, and he's making sure that everybody is together. And that's where we see today's Bible story. Now, I want you not only to learn it, we're going to discuss it, have you do a stop and learn for head, heart, and hands. So, heads up, here's the story: the resting tribes and the rest of the tribes from Joshua chapter 1. Joshua called over the leaders, the tribal leaders for East Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben. And he said, now remember, Moses promised that you would have your rest east of the Jordan River, and now you do have your rest. But now it's time to go and help all the other tribes be able to go and take the promised land, and they're going to have to fight for it. So what I want you to do is Joshua said, I want you to take your livestock, your family, your children, and leave them on the east side of the Jordan River. But I want your best fighting men to actually lead out, to be in the front of the battle and be able to stay in the battle, stay in the leadership until all of your brother tribes are at rest as well. Well, the tribal leaders of these three tribes came together and they told Joshua that we will fight from the front. You can count on us. We will fight until our brothers are at rest. And if any of our group doesn't fight, we will put them to death. May you be strong and courageous. And that's the story from God's word that we have today from Joshua chapter 1. Okay, let's take a look at the discussion questions that I want you to stop and do. Again, they're in those three sections. Head, you're going to get the facts right. Heart, you're going to wrestle with the truths that came from the story, especially when we're talking about that word rest and what that means and how it also applies to us today. And then hands. So what? What are you going to do about this? And is there opportunities that you're going to need to address? Address that, and then we'll move on. Okay. There's a classic definition for mobilization. It talks about helping someone awaken and then be equipped in order to align with God. We're going to break these three down to help you really understand mobilization and missions. Now, is this going to be mobilization among your sending church or others that are your partners? Well, maybe you might be able to, but this is geared toward the church that you're helping to start. Even from the very get-go, they need to be thinking about mobilizing and who needs to hear Jesus next. This is how you get your small groups to multiply and churches to multiply. This is how they begin to awaken and see lostness around them, be able to be equipped and know what to do to be able to go and work among them, and then be able to align with God's work. And I think you'll find that this is something that will help you in working with your church and seeing reproducibility. Okay, we're going to do something that I hope is helpful for you. We're going to use the Awaken and Equip and Align model with a community development presentation. Just a few slides here that are going to help you be able to meet needs that we need to talk about, and at the same time you can learn about mobilization. Okay, here we go. We're talking about doing no harm among people in need. The Hippocratic Oath is something that is regularly used to awaken medical students to be able to do the idea of doing no harm. Look at this. I will neither give a deadly drug to anyone who asks for it, nor I will make a suggestion to that effect. Similarly, I will not give to a woman an abortive remedy. In purity and holiness, I will guard my life and my art. Isn't that incredible? But this is used to awaken students, to medical students, to needs and their responsibilities. All right, we would say that Jesus awakened his disciples. If anyone wants to come with me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Luke chapter 9. When you take a look at what Jesus was doing, he used this verse to awaken them. Was he equipping them? No. Was he aligning them with God's work? Not really, not yet. He was basically just telling them to count the cost and be awake to realize that following him is a death sentence. And that's huge. And it's the same that's on us today. Now, we're going to move from awaken to equip, and we're going to look at causes, effectives in a harm and be able to look at just a few of these to be able to help you be equipped when you work cross-culturally among people in need and give you the idea of how mobilization is working. First of all, you want to avoid the donor effect. We understand giving money is really out there, but it's more important than that. When you approach someone that has a need, instead of saying, how can we help you? You want to say, what needs changing around here? How can we work on that together? It's more of an equal footing rather than the donor effect. And we're going to look at donor effect, domino effect, and domination. But the idea of a domino effect, it talks about the haves and have-nots. The domination comes when you are providing money to a people that are really in need. Well, there might have been people that had been helping them, landlords or other people that are doing handouts. Maybe those providing the handouts, they want to take a break and they leave, and all of a sudden you're stuck holding the bag. Or when a landlord hears that somebody is being given money, then they up their rent, which means as soon as you pull out of your support, then maybe they're out on the street and you don't want them homeless. Also, we're looking at the bait and switch effect. And this happens sometimes. It's the idea is if you can get money, maybe some in your group or you yourself might be tempted to use it for other things. You must, if you're going to be asking for money about a specific thing, you're going to need to stick to that specific thing. You don't want to redirect its purpose. And at this point, I want to also talk about paying pastor salaries. Avoid that at all costs. What you want to do is help your pastors in your churches to be bivocational, be able to have their own source of income. And that way, any money that's given by the church or church members or the missionaries working among them can go for the main thing. It can go to help the work continue and it not be just tied up in a pastor's salary. That's going to be a temptation, but it's something that I think will pay off in the long run. And then number 4, you got to watch out for the he's our man effect. If you choose to work just among one person, I had mentioned in one of the other sessions, especially in evangelism, talking about looking for a person of peace. The first person that you interact with, you may have a really strong relationship, and that person may or may not be the best person to work with. Usually they have, as Curtis Sargent said, that reputation. They can have some kind of recommendation of you to others, but you have got to make sure that that person is actually God's man. Because if you start working with the wrong person, it can actually lead others to give you lip service just to get the resources that your team might be providing, and then they back away or they go do something else. What you want to do is get the best person going and be able to help that be able to happen. Bryant Myers helps us understand the whole issue of sin that can be involved in community development. And so we are moving from awakening and equipping to aligning. Read this with me if you don't mind. Sin is what distorts these relationships. Sin is at the root cause of deception, distortion, and domination, we've just talked about. When God is on the sidelines or written out of our story, like at the Tower of Babel, we do not treat each other well. Aligning with God and His purposes is so critical, is so key. Let me give you 3 attitude checks that will help you not only align with God, but be able to align your attitude in the right way. First of all, commit to work at that heart level. We've talked about worldview. We've talked about bridges, barriers, and gaps. We've talked about Bible stories that will help you cross over to that. The thing that you want to make sure, though, is we're using the phrase unsealed churches because so many times churches can seal out anybody that is not of the dominant group that's there. That's something that you want to take a look at and be very careful of. It may be an economic level. It could be from a certain apartment complex. It doesn't just have to be an ethnicity or one of our, what we would say, our North America people spectrum of kinship, place, and interest as well. Continue to work at the worldview, and you want to take a look at that choice that you've got, whether these that are the new believers in this small group are going to assimilate into your church or whether it can be a new church plant. And that's going to be the challenge also for those that are in your small group, the church that is coming out of the plant that you have, as you have them start new work and you cast vision and they're out there witnessing, they're evangelizing, they're starting their own small groups. Do they assimilate it back into the church that you've just started, or are you able to keep that going? All right, second of all is to take a desire to keep all things local. The idea of that is being able to have things as specific and unique, addressing the worldview issues. How you communicate is going to be very important. If you are just using the market language, that sends one message and it kind of cripples other people that don't have the language. How you communicate is very important. Are you just going to be in the trade language, and is it going to be just out there where some of the group is going to be really having a hard time? And then the idea is to be ruthless with whatever you do in working among the people where you are. For communications, generic and for any kind of community development, you're going to have to be very ruthless to be able to eliminate whatever is not working. And then the last one is know the learning preference of the people. Bryant L. Myers talks about this being one of the most effective and key points in doing community development. Helping you to align with God and His purpose means, is it going to communicate His word in print form, in curriculum, or is it going to be through an oral means where you take a Bible story, do head, heart, and hands, be able to keep that small group turning into a church? The whole thing is about the timing for involvement. Aligning with God means it's in His timing and for His purposes. And that means your timing must be right, especially as you're taking a look at where they are and not necessarily where you are. Okay. One of the final things is this objective that you need to have in bringing community development, seeking community transformation. This is pulled right out of Luke 2:52. I picked this up from Brian L. Myers as well. This is good for helping you to help your church even align with God and His purposes, or any of those that are going to grow to maturity. It's the idea they grow to maturity in their wisdom and stature and favor with God and man, right out of Luke 2:52. That was a description of how Jesus grew. I think it's important for community development to follow those same four areas. So many times with community development, we only want to address the physical. Or even what about friendship and being on the same footing with social? And what about mental? We see mental illness just being so rampant these days. Being able to help, be able to address those issues, be able to help them have wisdom is extremely important. And I saved the best one for last. It's their spiritual involvement as well. Yes, we can offer that cup of water, but we want to do that in Jesus' name. Here's two quotes for you, okay? This first one's for me. As you have been mobilized, now you must mobilize them. The whole idea of awakening, equipping, and aligning with God and His purpose, I would like to think is what you have done. Now it's your turn to mobilize those in your church, those that you have been working with to get started. The other one is from Charles Spurgeon, and I wonder if he got this from Lottie Moon or vice versa. Lottie Moon was a missionary in China. She wrote something similar to this. You will never make a missionary of the person who does no good at home. He that will not serve the Lord in the Sunday school at home will not win children to Christ in China. This is really tough. This is saying that the best out of your small group that's becoming a church, taking on those healthy 12 foundational characteristics of health, your best people out of that need to be the ones that you send out. When Lottie Moon was writing as a missionary from China back to Virginia, she wrote a letter to a church asking for another woman to leave Virginia and come to help her in China. And you know what she said? She said, I want you to call out the most involved woman in your church that's single. I want her to come out here to China and help me. And the idea is that she is so effective in Virginia that when she leaves, she'll literally hurt the church. There will be a gap that somebody is really going to have to step up with. Now, I know hurting the church is typically not something that we would think of, but Lottie Moon was talking about in contrast to sending out somebody that's just on the periphery, not doing anything. She wants the best to be able to help her on the front lines. I would like to think if you're going to be mobilizing people to help your team, your people team, that you would want the best from the church. I would like to think that you are the best from your church, that the God is moving in their heart. He's awakened you. He has been equipping you through this video as one of those tools, and then be able to move you out as well. Aligning with God and His mission in what the home, the church, and the world. I like that. But I like this quote from Charles Spurgeon. If they're not going to be winning people to Christ in the church that they're a part of, they're not likely going to be doing it in the church plant that they're going to try to be a part of. Now, let's go back. Actually, in assembling a team, you heard this, so it's been a while. It was in our very first video. We talked about the role of champion. In that, we talked about it being usually a pastor. In the church where you are working, where you are being able to help a small group take on the characteristics of a church, you are developing leaders, and one of those leaders is the pastor. That person, that man needs to be that champion. He's going to be, again, the spiritual leader that the team is going to look back to. He's going to have overall responsibility representing your church and having a passion for the lost, but also being able to send out your members. In this session, I want to add to the champion a little bit that he would become a prayer leader for your church for calling out the called. Having prayer times where you are meeting together and seeing how does the Holy Spirit move. Is there somebody that the Holy Spirit is moving? You could do that with your church. I heard of a church that was meeting. It had never called out an international missionary. This was in East Asia. They prayed almost all day, and there was a doctor in the group that said, I'll go if somebody else will go with me. And they left that night, caught a bus almost at midnight, and went overseas. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do this immediately, but it needs to happen pretty quick. The other thing in this role of being the champion is being this vision caster. You want to introduce the whole concept of people teams training and give it credibility, give it authority, introduce them to what training that you got and be able to help them, especially that champion, be able to move to that next level. We're going to talk in a minute what it means to find that people group, to be able to search and conduct a people search that will help you be able to determine where God would be leading you, your church, and that people team next. And then the champion also is typically the one that recruits team members. I know that I was really praying that God would use me in international missions. And I was praying about this, and I got a phone call from a missionary overseas asking me to be on his team. And he said, now, Mark, you can pray about this. And I told Chuck, the missionary, I said, Chuck, God has been working with me for about a month. Where have you been? And that kind of freaked him out. That was our joke. But it's the idea that when you call out somebody, you should be in an environment where you are ready to serve. Then you can be able to help these teams get together. Now, I want to talk about something else. I want to speak specifically to the missionaries and ideally to be able to pass this on to the pastor as well. Remember how we talked about there being 12 foundations for a healthy church? That is no small thing. But helping somebody that's in that church, one of the effective things is not just having the 12 things, but implementing them, making sure that they're making disciples that can make disciples. When Avery Willis and I wrote Truth That Sticks, we were looking really closely at Real Life Ministries in Post Falls, Idaho. Jim Putman was the pastor. And we were taking a look at Master Life and also matching it up with what he had as well. And we put this in our book, Truth That Sticks. So I pulled this out of Truth Sticks training because I think it relates to who you're going to be recruiting. Are you going to recruit somebody that's dead in their sins? No. Are you going to recruit maybe a brand new believer that's just born again and maybe is characterized by ignorance, being a spiritual infant? Probably not. Now, you'll have to determine, especially as you know your people in your small group that's becoming a church, and you're going to be sending out teams. The idea, are they a spiritual child where they're only focused on themselves and what they're studying? I doubt that they'll want to go out anyway. But you start turning the corner and doing what we call a spiritual young adult, characterized by service. Now, when you start taking a look at service, typically that's starting to say, hey, there's Sue over here. She is really sick. Can we get a meal to be able to help feed her family? Her husband is working, her children are in school, and she is sick, too sick to get out of bed. And being able to be characterized by service, that's something you can start listening for right from when you have a small group all the way up to where you have even a church. But it's the idea, can they become not just spiritual parents, but can you find somebody that is a spiritual parent? They are intentionally reproducing themselves. They're sharing Christ. And by the way, if your small group and that's become a church is not leading people to Christ, you may want to look at the spiritual level of where they are. And I know as pastors, if you remember that diagram where we talked about going deep vertically, the shepherds and teachers would say, "Oh, they're spiritual infants, they're spiritual children, they're never going to be working." One of the things that Jim Putman told us at Real Life Ministries is he had 12 that he was specifically discipling in his church. And he met another pastor, and that was from another denomination. He says, "Hey, how's it going?" And that other pastor goes, "Oh man, these guys, they're so immature. I just don't know how it's going to go." And Jim says, "Well, aren't you putting them forward and letting them fail, but letting them learn?" He goes, "Oh, that would be an embarrassment." Well, Jim was putting them out, and he saw that same guy a year later, and Jim had been able to get a couple of church planters, Bible study leaders out of that. I believe even a associate pastor in his church. And he saw that other pastor, and he said, "Hey, how's it going with those 12? How are they doing?" He said, that other pastor said, "We had to disband that group. They just were lousy." Well, being able to help somebody become a spiritual parent is an intentional process, and for them to be reproducing who they are and what they do is really something that's got to be intentional. But you look at the characteristics of a person, and who are you going to be choosing from to be able to mobilize, awaken, be able to equip, and then be able to help them align with God's purposes. Let's take a look at these characteristics I pulled from Loving the Church, Blessing the Nations by George Miley. He had these wonderful characteristics that I'm going to leave on the screen. You can look at them later. But as you take a look at who these are, I don't know. It's been same in my experience walking as a missionary. I'm always looking to do the newest thing. I don't necessarily fit the mold. One of the things that I don't like is that one right there. Noticeable areas of immaturity. They're not perfect. They can grate on people from time to time. They have personality quirks and tics. And at this point, I need to thank you for being patient for how this training has been going on. But are they kingdom focused? They can be extremely loyal to the church where they belong, but yet be the most critical of it, but yet at the same time see your church in the bigger kingdom of God and see the need that's being needing to be done. Now, I also don't know about the last one. I left it in here. George Miley says it's true, but unsure we can trust them. You'll have to determine that on your own through accountability. Whatever they volunteer and agree to do, hold them accountable to do that. That's it. If you're casting vision and they say, "I can do that," then you have got to help them be able to succeed. Take a look at that. You may want to do a screenshot. Come back to this later, and you're always welcome to be able to stop and be able to write some of these down if you like. In taking a look at who you're calling out, I see it as a high holy moment. This was a couple in St. Louis, Missouri that I had the opportunity to work with, and the church, their church, gathered all of the ordained men in their church around them and sent them out. I would like to think that anybody that's going to be called out of your church is going to be set aside as well, commissioned and sent out. We're going to have a sending service at the end of this session. We'll talk about that. But at the same time, you have got to be willing to stand behind those people. Have you ever noticed when you do a commissioning service or an ordination of a pastor or deacon, people stand around or behind? It's to show their support in sending you out, and then be able to follow up on that and actually follow them. Now, here's a stop and do for you as well. Take a look at these mobilization priorities. I'm going to come back and address this, but I want you to look at all of these P's down the left side that really help you be able to communicate and really, get the word out about the need. These are scrambled in that yellow box. Those phrases are scrambled. Which ones do they match up with? Stop and do, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about these. All right, let's match this phrase to the mobilization priority. You ready? Which one would be strategy that drives action? I believe it's planning. That's a phrase right out of the planning book from the U.S. Army that I actually tripped across one day. And I think that you would agree that strategy drives action. That's part of your planning over here. All right, get the right people on the bus. Mike Collins wrote a book, From Good to Great. That was one of his things that he talked about in that. Get the right people on the bus. Yes, the people. Being able to call out the called, be able to have those that you're going to be standing behind. Okay, an early advertising director, Wanamaker said, "Half my ad budget is wasted, but I don't know which half." Your promotional resources, sometimes you don't necessarily know everything that's being done. You may print up 500 refrigerator magnets that's going to have people pray for your team. But that doesn't mean everybody's going to take a refrigerator magnet and put it on the refrigerator, A, and B, actually be reminded to pray for you every time they see it. Number 4, it's the missionary's number 1 request. I would hope that that's a no-brainer, and you said prayer. I would hope that that alignment with God is so important, and it's something that characterizes what you are doing, and then having the intercessory prayer for others is so important. All right. Ed Stetzer said the church doesn't have a mission. Mission has a church. That goes to the process. That's, I think, a pretty profound statement, but it's the idea that God's mission has a church that he's inviting to be on mission with him. You take a look at your process of how things are going, that's what we're talking about. And then the last one fits with placement. I'll go anywhere provided it be forward. David Livingstone, missionary years ago to Africa, said that. And I would hope that your people team is going to continue to move forward, and the church that you're working with is going to advance as the kingdom of God needs to be expanded, and we are under the mandate of the Great Commission. Now, how are you going to find out who these people are? If you do just a quick review of what was in assembling a team and especially in addressing lostness, we want you at this point to be looking around your community and at least start taking a look at nationalities and other immigrants. There are 50 million in the United States that are immigrants, refugees, or students. Being able to trip across these, I would hope, is something that you would want to do. Also, remember, in addressing lostness, we talked about those 3 groups, whether it's the ethno-linguistic people group, whether it's people that are kind of crammed together in one place like a apartment complex or a college dorm, and then associational groupings, being able to take a look at the people that are there. I had the opportunity to go out with this team in Lansing, Michigan, of all places. And one of the first things we did in a community survey, knocking on doors, finding out who was there, is we found thousands of people from the country of Mexico that no one knew was even there. As the skilled workers were moving out of the Rust Belt, unskilled workers were moving in, and these Mexicans were dying to get a church going. They didn't even know where to start. And so that was something that was very easy to do. And then be able to have spiritual receptivity to gauge that, are they open to the gospel or not, is going to be very important to help you know about the people that your church is wanting to take on. And then simply conducting man on the street interviews. There was a man that we met, my partner and I, when we went out, and he was carrying some diaper bags. And he said he was 18 years old and that his girlfriend that was 19 was getting ready to have a baby and he needed to bring in some diapers. And when we explained what we were doing, he goes, "Oh, yeah, you're from that Baptist church around the corner. I accepted Christ as my Savior when I was 11 years old and I've never been back." And I said, "Well, would you be interested in having a small group that meets in your home?" He said, "You would send someone to my home to conduct a Bible study?" And I said, "Yes, we would send it from that Baptist church. Would that be okay?" He said, "Well, I need to talk to my girlfriend, but yeah," he said, "I can almost promise you." And I said, "Guess what? You can invite anybody you want." He said, "I can invite my friends. I can invite anybody I want." And I said, "Yes, you can." Right there, we got a small group going in about a 3-minute conversation because the Lord was already at work and we were searching and trying to see a person of peace and looking for where people were receptive, and that church is working with them be able to do that. If you will write me at SnowdenMinistries@gmail.com. I can send you the leader guide if you've not asked for that. It has a guide in there on how you conduct a people search. And Van Sanders, I appreciate Van being able to do that. I don't get a chance to do this often, but that's him with his back to us in the blue shirt. And it was a good experience, and I think it'll be a good experience for you guys as well. All right, let's take a look at who you're going to be working among, specifically an ethno-linguistic people group. A people is the largest group through which the gospel can flow, get this, without encountering significant barriers. And these barriers lead to barriers of understanding and acceptance. Sometimes it can be distance. Sometimes it can be, I don't know, a river blocking you going across a very busy bridge. I don't know. But it's the largest group through which the gospel can flow. Are there barriers? And you need to know what they are. Significant barriers include worldview, we've talked about, ethnicity, language, culture, all of those. The idea is that you need to keep searching. You need to go. I love the word that I picked up, I believe, from Terry Sharp in getting some training in peoplegroups.info. He talked about wanting to get to granularity. And I love that word. Being able to get honed down to who the people are, not just maybe a nationality, but get down to who they are. And then be able to enter what you find on peoplegroups.info. We're going to talk about peoplegroups.info just for a second because it's important. Do you see this up on the top right-hand corner? It says My Account. If you will click on My Account, it will actually have you apply for an account that will help you get beyond the firewall. There is protected information behind this screen that you want to get to. When you look at your dashboard or you look at people affinities or their adherence, that is protected. Being able to have, and here's just a screenshot from Cincinnati, and I'm the administrator for peoplegroups.info for the Cincinnati area, so I've entered this, but this came through being able to do a people search. We had volunteers in, we had different student groups in. Some people are willing to come to your community just to be able to have a mission trip. You can have them prayer walk, or you can also have them interact with people and say, hey, take a look at the top one. There are people from Egypt that have immigrated to the Cincinnati area. There are about 1,080 is what we've been able to determine. There may be more than that, but at this point, we know what street that they live on, and being able to work among them is extremely important. And being able to have a collection like this is really helpful. Not that you're going to turn them into immigration services, but this helps you be able to define what you're doing. Now, I'm moving from peoplegroups.info, keeping this going, to peoplegroups.org. Peoplegroups.info is run by our Southern Baptist North American Mission Board, working with the IMB. The IMB runs peoplegroups.info by themselves. You can find a lot more background information for where these groups serve overseas, because you may reach a point where you've identified a people where you are, like say those Egyptians, but then you're wanting to hone those Egyptians beyond just saying Egyptians and being able to take a look at different people within Egypt and say which ones are here, and it makes you knowledgeable being able to talk among them. Also, when you're going to be mobilizing, it's the idea that you may want to have some communication resources, some media that help you cast vision and paths for involvement as well. Usually print, video, social media, and networks are important. The print, it can be different resources that you do, like prayer cards, and I've talked about prayer in refrigerator magnets. Videos might be posted. I know if you look at international missions on Vimeo, you can pull up a lot of different videos and hear people's prayer requests or see features on certain missionaries that are in service, and those in your church may want to produce their own video and produce it out in their own language. That's always exciting. Being able to attend missions conferences and be able to represent your group, be an advocate for your group, can be very, very important. Also, being able to mobilize and be an advocate means learning more and more about them. There is something called Lausanne Committee for Evangelization. Lausanne it's now called the Lausanne Movement, and you can see how to collaborate. That's a great resource. We've talked about orality in this training series. There's something called the International Orality Network that you may want to join. There are all kinds of different resources that are in that resource. Even the Ethnic American Network, as I was preparing for this, I realized they had changed their name to Full Spectrum, talking about the full spectrum of people that are out there. The thing is there are resources to help you know how to mobilize, be able to move to the next level, and be able to call out the called, either to be a part of what you're doing or have those that you're working with simply follow what you've been doing and mobilize what they're doing. I want you to, at this point, do this exercise. We're going to take just a couple of minutes to take a break from me, and I want you to do this exercise. What I want you to do is have a leader be able to look at each one of these, and then I want you to walk from one side of the room to the other to determine what you're going to do. The example that we use is always, which would you rather do? So let's have everybody in the room stand up and go to the wall as you're facing me. Go to your left if you would rather watch TV, or go to your right if you would rather go to the movies, and go ahead and do that. And then you explain why. So you, the leader, can stop this and be able to go through each one of these. And I think it will be a really creative learning opportunity for mobilization and missions as you go through this. One of the reasons that I had you do Take It to the Wall is this is a great learning exercise for anybody that is wanting to do mobilization, or maybe you've been asked to be a speaker in a student group or young adults or some group that maybe takes a little bit more of a creative approach rather than just sitting and getting and lecturing, being able to help them stand up and move from one side to the other and discuss it helps them get at different aspects of missions, and then use this as a filtering opportunity. Who is really interested? Who really gets into this? And be able to pull them aside and ask them to be team members. One of the things that you really want to communicate to your those that you're mobilizing in your church is you want them to be a lizard, okay? You don't want them to be a frog. I think I heard this first from David Garrison. He talked about the idea of frogs being missionaries that just sat around waiting for resources to come flying by, and then they would use that long tongue to reach out and grab them. What you want to do is be a lot more like a lizard. The idea of a lizard is that they are always on the hunt. They are always seeking resources. They're always seeking opportunities to be able to not only communicate or be an advocate for others, but also be able to help constantly be evangelizing as well. The thing is, the resources that you're going to use needs to be, sought out. Just last week, I had a pastor of one of our Arabic language churches be in my office, and we committed to give him 12 Arabic language Bibles that he was really in need of, and being able to reach out and be able to say, hey, can we be a part of your ministry is not bad. And inviting others, say, would you like to be a part of this ministry is not bad as well. But the idea is that you want your people that you're mobilizing to be lizards and not frogs. One of the reasons that's important is you're going to need to look at how you network among different people for different reasons. When you're looking at a people team, they have got to find help beyond their team, especially if it's just a team of 2 or 4. Being able to have access, you may need to go to those that are working in a specific housing project and be able to talk to the manager. I've actually heard here in the United States of someone saying, if you will give us an apartment, we will have it as a place where a chaplain can be housed 2 or 3 days a week, and where we can be able to hold church services, and we can have socials on every Saturday night, and our church will commit to do that. And actually, that has been done. Who will help us plant churches? Well, you want to make sure that's not just a government worker, but it's someone that's going to be from your church. You are, understanding, and you're committed to understanding that they're wanting to plant New Testament brand new churches. Keeping doctrinal integrity is important. Seminaries, different denominational groups like state convention associations are going to be very helpful. Who would help us evangelize and distribute? There are all kinds of different resources out there, but again, be careful of those that are generic. And then you want to take a look at who wants to join us to pray for this people. When you do that, you can find, even in meeting needs, there's disaster relief organizations. You can take a look at ESL to help about praying or meeting needs. All of those are going to be very important in helping you be an effective networker. I put the lizard down there, to be an effective lizard to really be able to help the people where you're working. I want to reiterate this whole process and where mobilization fits. You are beginning a mobilization process that should continue. The idea is that out of mobilization, out of your church that you've helped start, you're wanting them to have different roles. You're wanting to start the process all over again. You're wanting to train them and lead them to this video. If they don't have English as a language, perhaps it's something that you could teach them how to do using the learning guide. And you could talk to me and have permission to be able to translate the leader guide. and help them evangelize, help them start small groups and then train leaders and form those small groups that can multiply. Being able to do all what you did is done for the glory of God. Now, before we go, there's something that you need to really consider is that's having a peer review. We want you to have regularly scheduled, at least annually. I think having team evaluations, especially in the beginning, every quarter, every 6 months at least, is going to focus on desired outcomes. Is what you're doing working? You have accountability not just to each other, but to God. Are you being able to abide? Is this something that really is being a blessing? And then you're responsible to your co-laborer as well. Is everybody carrying their freight? Is there some kind of life situation that's happened among some of your team members that makes them maybe have to step away from a while? Well, is there a person that can help take their place? And that's important as well with the peer review. There are 10 rules for being able to conduct a peer review. I got this from David Garrison's Counsel to Peers and also Eddie Cox with his 10 rules. And both of those, these 10 rules I've adopted and kind of mashed together. So take a look at this. You can create a screenshot right now. Hello. Being able to have these 10. The team leaders need to present the master plan. If you haven't done that with your group, you need to do that already. All team members need to be present. You need to have 3 to 5 in every review group. So if you've got great big groups, split them out. You got to check your ego at the door. I've even seen boxes of Kleenex in the room. Okay, this can get emotional, but it's the idea that everybody has copies and they are trying to make their master plan and the work they do as effective as possible. This is why having a master plan is so important. Hopefully you've done your homework, and number 6, you can determine what's it gonna take and have that perspective. Is what you're doing going to evangelize, be able to put people in small group and start small groups among this entire population segment, or maybe just an exceptional few? And then each person presents their plans in just 5 to 10 minutes, and then everybody needs to have a review. There needs to be not just, as you're seeing, critical comments, but constructive criticism. You're always looking for strengths, how to improve it, and anything that's overlooked. Especially as you get going in this, it's going to be changing and shifting, and you need to be able to have this group to bounce things back. Again, you need to see this. If you've got several teams in your community that are working, this may take a while. It may need to be a retreat on a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon, but you want to make sure that it concludes in prayer and not just a superficial, God bless all the missionaries and our work as we're working, but really being able to spend a time abiding with God, allowing Him to refresh you and be able to have everything that you do be able to glorify Him. An option that I wanted to mention here at the end as well is what we call a city tour, being able to go out. If you've been doing a Jericho prayer walk, that may be a vision tour where you're bringing people to where you have your prayer walk, be able to drive around and be able to not only see points of interest, but be able to, and one time I know we were able to talk with a imam from a mosque or a priest at a certain temple, but be able to interact with these people and be able to do this. When we have done this, the photos from Louisville, it's really an impactful point as we met and ate at an ethnic restaurant. And no, Taco Bell's not an ethnic restaurant. All right, guys, those are the 7 jobs that we've done. And I appreciate you starting this process again, being able to mobilize teams to be able to get out and be able to address lostness, be able to have those master plans and evangelize, have small groups formed that can start churches, and have leaders that are going to continue the process. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. I pray that as you finish well, you will have a sending service. Enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, allow them to pray over you and with you. And then, if you haven't set them yet, continue to have future team meetings and be able to encourage each other. And lastly, I'll say go. This concludes People Teams training and especially the mobilization video. Thank you for being a part of it. If I can help you, please contact me at SnowdenMinistries@gmail.com.